So the first thing is just jump into it. Even though it's daunting, even though there's a source book, a player's handbook that's literally like 250 pages long, it's not really 250 pages of sheer rules. There's a lot of lore and world building and deities and planes of existence and a lot of stuff that you really don't need to worry about as a player, as someone who is going to be playing in a campaign. That's mainly meant for the dungeon master who's going to be creating the story, creating the narrative. And so don't worry about trying to understand the different levels or the different realms. And I mean, I don't even know it myself, and I've been in it, almost 8 years now. With that said, what I'd highly recommend that you do is join the community. Go into the community and just jump in with 2 feet. I'm going to talk more about the community itself, where to go to, what resources you have. But the first note to jump into it is to get into a community, because it really is. Dungeons and Dragons has been around since the 80s. There are veterans, there are brand new folks. But what's awesome about it is the community is so inclusive. They're so nice. When I jumped into it originally, I thought there was going to be, the typical, cold shoulders, or like the typical, I'm a veteran, I'm the best, just sit and look pretty and don't ask questions. No, most, if not every single instance that I've had where I've played in a game store or with a bunch of randos, it's been fantastic. They've all been super welcoming, super inclusive, and super helpful. So, I will admit you're going to need to learn, like have an open mind to learning this game, because it does get pretty nuanced. It does get pretty detailed. However, you can just jump into it. You can do it. So the first thing that I recommend that you do is jump into it, right? There are a couple of, these Dungeons and Dragons, like starter guides that you can do if you wanted to play more like a board game with roommates or with your family. Excuse me. And, you can get those, but, those are a very, very prefabbed, very linear type of game. The starting that the D&D folks have, these intro packages or these intro boxes, they're almost all the same through each iteration. They really recycle the content, and so I'm not really too keen about that. But nonetheless, you can still jump into these starter packs. You can get them at Target. You can get them at pretty much in any game store. But most of the game stores will say, hey, don't. Just come to our weekly Adventures Guild. So most game stores have an Adventures Guild. I want to recommend going. At least in my area, there's about 4 that are within about a 2-mile radius. And I'm not in a huge metropolitan city anymore. I moved down south of Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City itself has like 5 to 10 places that I can think of. Where I'm at, there's at least 4. And each one of them has their own adventure league, or at least they did before the pandemic. The one store that I do typically go to regularly has, they just restarted it in August, which is really exciting. Now, I'm already running 3 different campaigns, and so I haven't had a chance really to jump in, but it's usually Wednesday nights. You can go for 2 to 3 hours, and they'll teach you how to create a character. They'll teach you the world of Dungeons and Dragons, and they'll even have folks there that will, DM. If you want to go and DM and run your own campaign, Adventure League is the best way to do it. That's where I started my adventurers. That's where I started my campaign. So those are a few things that I recommend. There's also a whole community on these different websites like Roll20. That's the one that I mainly use. But they have a whole community forum where you can literally just jump into a game based on campaign, based on style, whatever you want. It's really, really awesome. Again, they are really, really nice. And I really like Roll20 because it's more of an interactive, digital video game rather than, playing like a tabletop board game. And so Roll20 does have a learning curve of using it. But again, all the folks there that are in the community are so helpful and ready to to provide guidance. I recommend using those if you don't have in your area an open or an opened up game store. Okay, so that's basically my first section. Let's talk about the next section, the rules, right? So when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, there's a lot of rules. There is a full player's handbook that you have to, kind of base all of your decisions on. And sometimes it gets kind of daunting what choices you really have and can make in the game. Because the game itself is based on two different styles of games, two different genres of playing. There's role-playing, non-combat game, more like narrative-driven play style, and then there's tactical tabletop board game fights. So anytime that you're out of combat and you're interacting with characters in the story that are not players or NPCs, you're going to be role playing. You're going to be play acting. So there is some performative theater. You don't have to bring a voice, a whole character if you want. The way that you build your character, and we'll touch on that. We'll give you some points of reference to base, your personality on. There's ideals, there's bonds, there's flaws, there's backgrounds, and you build that all yourself. And that's what the beauty is of Dungeons and Dragons. There's such a creative element to it that I love so much. So when it comes to the rules here, honestly, that's the biggest barrier to entry. What's great though, and I'll have it here on the screen, you'll see if you're looking at the video, they've got an awesome revamped app. The folks at Dungeons and Dragons, they've invested heavily in the D&D Beyond website as well as the app. And without paying a cent, you literally get all the base resources for free. Now, you don't get the source books. You're going to need to pay for those, but they always have a good deal. You can get the basic, Dungeon Master's Guide, the Player's Handbook, and the Monster Manual, usually for under $100, which I think is a steal of a deal. I think for a while they had like 30% off it, which probably brings it down to like $80 for all of them. But if you're going out and buying a board game, typical board game that's not like your Candyland or your Chutes and Ladders is around $50 to $100. So, and then if you're just buying one book, your local game store will sell it for about $25. So it's not too huge of a barrier to entry. I think the biggest is your time. So with that said, as I've shown you on the side here, D&D Beyond provides you the base rules of the game. And not only just, creating a character, but it's got a lot of the races, classes, it's got a lot of the equipment, how to play the game, what your ability scores are, what are feats, what are skills, what are backgrounds. And so it breaks it down. It almost gives you the whole player's handbook because, I think it's smart. I think they should definitely provide the core base game for free if they want to add more people in the community. I think, Wizards have done that. Wizards is the company. So with that said, the rules are free. You really don't need to pay much to get into the game. Heck, I played with someone for over a year who rented from the library the player's handbook. So you could go to your local library and try to pick it up. The second thing that I think is crucial is getting to know how to fight. Again, it's tactical fighting where everyone has one turn each round, and you go each round until the objective is completed or the enemy is defeated. Okay, so as a player character, you're going to be allotted certain actions each turn. Typical, modern tabletop games have this same structure where each person around the table is going to take their turn. They're allotted certain actions, certain resources that they can expend in order to complete certain actions, feats, skills, or attacks. And so with that in mind, it really does follow your typical board game. If you've ever played anything, again, a little more complicated than your Monopolies, even your Risks. I mean, Risks, you have, your typical going around the table, taking turns, dominating or conquering. So with that said, I would get to know, like, create your character first, then get to know fighting. But then again, my third point when it comes to the rules is just jump into it with both feet forward and don't look back. You don't need to be an expert to join a table. And I think being honest with everyone around the table and being like, look, this is my first time. I've watched, listened, read this. Help me here, but I really want to learn. I want to play because I want to have fun, because a lot of people have fun playing this. So with that said, join a table, join a group, and you might think that the crowd or the community that draws the people to this community are a little more reclusive, a little more this, a little more that, and that's not true. Really, I've played with all walks of life in the last 8 years. I've played with students, I've played with kids, I've played with parents, I've played with grandparents, I've played with, rich people, I've played with, high school students. So there's really no person that I think that this game doesn't fit for.